The dust had settled over the broken spur ranch like a heavy blanket, and Sam Mackenzie felt every grain of it in his bones. His weathered hands gripped the reins as his horse, Old Buck, picked its way carefully down the rocky path toward the barn. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, but Sam barely noticed the beauty in him. All he could think about was the chaos waiting for 3 weeks now. His cattle had been acting stranger than a cat in a thunderstorm. Every morning he'd find them scattered across 3 counties, some wandering into neighboring ranches, others disappearing entirely into the wilderness. The local sheriff had started asking questions, neighbors were getting mighty upset, and Sam's reputation as a capable rancher was crumbling faster than a house of cards in a tornado. As he approached the barn, something caught his eye that made him pull up short. There, sitting against the weathered wooden, was a figure that didn't belong in this dusty corner of Texas. A man in a faded red and yellow outfit, a painted white face that had seen better days, was nursing what appeared to be badly injured. The stranger's costume was torn and dirty, but there was no mistaking a circus. Miles away from any big top or traveling. Sam dismounted slowly, his spurs jingling in the evening quiet. The clown looked up with eyes that seemed far too old and wise for someone in such a colorful profession. Despite the painted smile on his face, there was a deep sadness lurking behind those, like a man who had seen too much of the world's harsh. "Evening, stranger," Sam said, tipping his head. "You're a long way from any circus I know of." The clown struggled to stand, wincing as he put weight on his injured leg. "Name's Cornelius Goodweather, but most folks just call me Corny," his voice carrying a slight accent that Sam couldn't quite place. "I'm afraid my traveling days have hit a rather significant obstacle." He gestured to his leg with a rueful that somehow managed to look genuine despite the painted one beneath it. Sam studied the man. In his 43 years, he'd learned to read people like a good horse reads the trail ahead. This Cornelius fellow might be dressed like a fool, but there was something about him that spoke of intelligence and maybe even wisdom. More importantly, Sam's gut instinct, the same one that had kept him alive through range wars and cattle rustling, told him this man meant no. "What happened to your leg?" Sam asked, stepping. Cornelius leaned heavily against took a rather unfortunate fall from a horse about 10 miles back. The beast got spooked by something in the brush and threw me clean off. Been walking ever since, or rather limping ever since. The sun was nearly gone now, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. Sam made a decision that would change everything, though he had no way of knowing it at the time. "Well, I can't leave a man hurt and stranded," Sam said. "The barn's got clean straw, and it's warm. You're welcome to spend the night, and come morning, I'll take a look at that leg properly." Cornelius's painted face brightened with genuine gratitude. "That's uncommonly kind of you, Mr. Mackenzie, Sam Mackenzie, and kindness is just common sense out here. Man who won't help a stranger in need might find himself in need of help from strangers someday." Sam helped Cornelius into the barn, noting how the clown seemed to take in every detail of the space with those keen eyes. The cattle were already bedded down, scattered throughout the large enclosure in their usual chaotic fashion. Some stood near the water trough, others had claimed spots near the hay pile, and a few stubborn ones had wandered to the far corners where they'd be hardest to round up come morning. "Quite a herd you have here," Cornelius observed, settling down onto a pile of fresh straw with visible relief. Sam snorted. "Had is more like it. These cattle have been giving me more trouble than a barrel full of wildcats. Can't keep them organized to save my life. Every morning it's like playing hide-and-seek with a bunch of 1,000-pound children. Perhaps they just need the right kind of encouragement." Cornelius, his eyes still moving over the cattle with an expression Sam couldn't quite read. Sam brought the clown some water and a bit of jerky from his saddlebag. "I appreciate the thought, but I've tried everything short of hiring a brass band to keep these critters in line. Sometimes I think they're conspiring against me." As the night deepened, Sam found himself lingering in the barn longer than usual. There was something about Cornelius that invited conversation. The clown had stories from all over the country, tales of traveling circuses, strange towns, and peculiar people. But more than that, he listened when Sam talked about his troubles with the cat, nodding thoughtfully and asking questions that showed he understood ranching better than his colorful costume might suggest. "You know," Cornelius said, as Sam finally prepared to head back to the house, In my travels, I've learned that sometimes the solution to a problem isn't found in fighting harder, but in understanding what's really needed. Sam paused. What do you mean by that? Well, take cattle for instance. They're herd animal by nature. They want to be together to feel safe and organized. But sometimes they need someone who speaks their language to show them how. And what language might that be? Sam asked, genuinely curious. Cornelius smiled. His real smile, not the painted one. The language of patience, routine, and gentle guidance. Animals respond to confidence and calm energy more than they do to force or frustration. Sam nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what the clown was getting at. Well, we'll see how patient I feel come morning when I'm chasing them all over creation. Perhaps morning will bring surprises, Cornelius said quietly. Sam bid the clown good night and headed to the house, where he fell into his bed exhausted. His dreams were filled with visions of perfectly organized cattle drives and circuses, where every animal moved in harmony, guided by invisible hands. The rooster's crow came earlier than usual, and Sam dragged himself out of bed with the familiar weight of dread settling in his stomach. Another day of chasing scattered cattle awaited him. He pulled on his boots, splashed water on his face, and headed out to the barn to check on his guest and assess the damage his wayward herd had undoubtedly caused overnight. But when Sam opened the barn doors, he stopped dead in his tracks. His mouth fell open, and he had to blink several times to make sure he wasn't still dreaming. Every single head of cattle was standing in perfectly straight rows, organized by size and color, facing the same direction. The sight was so unusual, completely at odds with chaos, too, that Sam's mind struggled to process what he was. The largest bulls stood in the back row, their massive forms creating an impressive backdrop. In front of them, the medium-sized steers arranged themselves in neat lines, and at the front, the smaller cattle completed the formation. Each animal stood calmly, not fidgeting or wandering as they usually did, but somehow contentedly maintaining their position. Impossible arrangement. What in the Sam Hill stepping? Cornelius was sitting up in his straw bed, stretching, and looking remarkably refreshed for a man who had spent the night in a barn. His painted face had been carefully cleaned and reapplied, and somehow his legs seemed to be giving him less. Good morning, Sam, Cornelius said cheerfully. I trust you slept well? Sam gestured helpless at his perfectly organized cattle. What did you do? I told you animals respond to the right kind of guidance. Sam noticed the clown's limp was barely noticed. Your cattle just needed someone to show them how much better they could feel when they worked together, instead of wandering aimlessly. But this is impossible, Sam sputtered. Cattle don't just organize themselves into formation. They're not soldiers. Cornelius brushed straw from his colorful costume and smiled. Aren't they? Think about it, Sam. Every herd has its own hierarchy, its own social structure. These animals have been trying to establish order, but without clear leadership, they've been lost and confused. All they needed was someone to help them remember their natural instincts. Sam walked among his cattle, marveling at how calm and content they seemed. Usually his presence in the barn would trigger a stampede of movement as various animals jockeyed for position or tried to escape work. Now they simply watched him with what appeared to be peaceful acceptance. How did you do this? Sam asked, turning back to Cornelius. The clown was gathering his few possessions, preparing to leave. I spent the night talking to them, he said simply. Not with words, of course, but with presence. Animals are much more perceptive than most people give them credit for. They can sense intention, emotion, energy. When someone approaches them with genuine calm and purpose, they respond accordingly. But you're a clown, Sam said, still struggling to understand. What would a circus performer know about cattle ranching? Cornelius paused, and for a moment something flickered across his painted features, a hint of the man beneath the... I wasn't always a clown, Sam. Before I joined the circus, I worked on ranches from Montana to New Mexico, learned from some of the best cattlemen in the country. But I discovered that what I really loved wasn't just working with animals. It was understanding them, communicating with them in ways that went beyond the conventional. This revelation hit Sam like a bolt of lightning. So you're telling me you're actually a cowboy dressed as a clown? I'm telling you that sometimes life takes unexpected turns, Cornelia. I joined the circus because I wanted to bring joy to people, to make them laugh and forget their troubles for a while. But I never forgot what I learned about animals. In fact, working with circus animals taught me even more about communication, trust, and the importance of routine and positive reinforcement. Sam looked back at his cattle, still standing in their perfect formation. This is the most organized they've ever been. Usually by this time of morning, half of them would be halfway to Mexico. Organization isn't about force. It's about creating an environment where cooperation feels natural and beneficial. These cattle have been scattered and chaotic because they've been stressed and uncertain. When you provide clear, calm guidance and establish routines they can depend on, they actually prefer to stay together and follow leadership. As if to prove his point, one of the cattle in the middle row shifted slightly out of line. Without any visible signal from Cornelius, the animals on either side gently nudged it back into position, and the formation remained intact. That's impossible, is it? Or is it just something you haven't seen before? Cornelius, think about how horses respond to a good trainer, or how sheep follow a shepherd. Animals want leadership. They want to feel safe and purposeful. Your cattle have been acting out because they've been feeling lost and direction. Sam realized that Cornelius was describing more than just cattle behavior. He was describing exactly how Sam had been feeling about his own life. The constant chaos, the feeling of fighting against forces, the exhaustion that came from never feeling like he was making real progress. So what you're telling me is that my cattle have been as frustrated as I have. Exactly, Cornelius. And just like people, when animals feel frustrated and directionless, they act out. They wander off. They resist cooperation. They make poor decisions. But when they have leadership they trust and routines they can depend on, they naturally want to be part of something organized and purposeful. A thought struck Sam. Is this how you work with circus animals? Cornelius's expression. Circus animals face unique challenges. They're asked to perform behaviors that aren't natural to them in environments constantly changing, surrounded by crowds and noise and unfamiliar situations. The only way to work with them is to build such a strong foundation of trust and communication that they feel secure even in And you built that kind of trust with my cattle in one night? I introduced the possibility, Cornelius corrected, but the real work will be up to you. What I did last night was show them that organization and cooperation feel better than chaos and confusion. Now you need to maintain that feeling by being the kind of leader they can trust and depend on. Sam felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. What if I can't? What if they go back to being scattered and wild the moment you leave? Cornelius limped toward him. Sam noticed the limp was returning as the clown prepared to resume his journey. They might, if you approach them the same way you did before. But if you take what you've learned here and apply it consistently, they'll remember this feeling and want to return to it. What did I learn here? Sam asked, realizing he wasn't entirely sure. That leadership isn't about controlling others. It's about creating conditions where others want. That organization isn't about forcing compliance. It's about making cooperation more appealing than chaos, and that sometimes the solutions to our biggest problems come from unexpected sources. As Cornelius spoke, Sam noticed that several of his cattle had turned their heads to watch the clown, as if they were listening to the conversation. It was subtle but unmistakable. These animals had formed some kind of connection to the strange man in the colorful. There's something else, isn't there? Sam asked, studying Cornelius carefully. Something you're not telling me about how you did this. Cornelius smiled, his real smile. There's always something more, Sam, but the most important things can't be explained, only experienced. Your cattle responded to genuine care, consistent energy, and clear intention. If you can provide those things, you'll see results that seem impossible until they become routine. Will I see you again? Sam asked, surprised by how much the idea of this unusual man disappearing bothered him. Probably not, Cornelius admitted. Circus life keeps me moving, and I have a feeling your cattle won't need my kind of help. He paused, looking at Sam, serious. But you might consider what else in your life could benefit from the same approach you'll use with your herd. Sam knew exactly what he meant. His relationship with his neighbors had grown strained as his cattle problems escalated. His hired hands had quit one by one, frustrated by the constant chaos. Even his friendship with the folks in town had suffered, as his reputation as a reliable rancher crumbled. You think I can fix more than just my cattle situation? I think, Cornelius, that a man who can learn to lead a herd of stubborn cattle can probably learn to rebuild trust with stubborn neighbors, reconnect with discouraged friends, and maybe even find some peace with his own stubborn. The truth of this hit Sam harder than for months he'd been so focused on fighting the symptoms of his that he'd never stopped to consider what was causing. His frustration with the cattle had made him impatient and hard, which made them more likely to scatter. His embarrassment about his failing reputation had made him avoid his neighbors, which made them more suspicious of his intentions. His worry about his ranch's future had made him desperate and reckless, which made every problem worse. So what you're saying is that I've been creating the very problems I've been trying to solve. I'm saying that problems have a way of feeding on themselves until someone breaks the cycle, Cornelia. Your cattle showed you that breaking the cycle, now you get to decide whether you want to apply that lesson more broadly. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the perfectly organized herd, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of a man trying to save a sinking ship, but the quiet, confident hope of someone who had just discovered that solutions were possible. I want to learn more, Sam said suddenly, about working with animals this way, about leadership, about all of it. Can you teach me before you go? Cornelius glanced toward the road where the morning traffic was beginning to pick up. I can share a few more insights, but remember, the real learning happens through practice, not instruction. For the next 2 hours, Cornelius walked Sam through what he called gentle leadership principle. He showed Sam how to read the cattle's body language, how to project calm confidence even when he felt frustrated, and how to create routines that would help the animals feel secure and purposeful. The key, Cornelius explained as they watched the cattle maintain their formation while eating breakfast, is consistency. Animals thrive on predictable routines and consistent energy from their leaders. If you're calm and confident on Monday but frustrated and harsh on Tuesday, they'll never feel secure enough to trust your leadership. What about when things go wrong? Sam asked. What about when I'm having a bad day or dealing with problems I can't control? That's when leadership matters most, Cornelius replied. Anyone can be calm and confident when everything is going well. True leadership shows up when things are difficult. Your cattle will learn to trust you not because you never have problems, but because you handle problems in ways that make them feel safe and secure. Sam practiced moving among the cattle, learning to read their responses, presence, and energy. Under Cornelius's guidance, he discovered that small adjustments in his posture, breathing, and intention could have dramatic effects on how the animals this magic. As he successfully guided a small group of cattle through a simple movement exercise using nothing but body language and calm. It's not magic, Cornelius. It's just communication in a language most people never learn to. Animals communicate primarily through energy, intention, and body language. When you learn to speak their language, what seems impossible becomes natural. As the sun reached its zenith, Cornelius began preparing for his departure in earnest. His legs seemed to be healing remarkably quickly, and he moved with increasing ease as he gathered his simple belongings. I have one more gift for you, he said, reaching into a small bag and pulling out what appeared to be an ordinary whistle. This belonged to an old cattleman who taught me more about animal communication than anyone else. He claimed it had special properties, but I think its real power is in reminding the person who uses it to stay calm and focused. Sam took the whistle, examining its worn surface. It felt warm in his hands, as if it had been sitting in sunlight, though it had been in Cornelius's bag all morning. How does it work? When you feel yourself getting frustrated or losing patience with your cattle, blow it softly. The sound will remind you to take a breath, center yourself, and remember what you've learned about gentle leadership. The cattle will learn to associate that sound with your calm, confident energy. Sam tucked the whistle into his shirt pocket, where it seemed to settle against his chest, a warm talus. There's something I need to ask you, Sam said, as Cornelius prepared to leave. This morning, when I saw my cattle in perfect formation, it scared me almost as much as it amazed me. How do I know I'm not getting involved in something beyond my understanding? Cornelius stopped and looked at Sam with his wise old eyes. What you're involved in, Sam, is the same thing every good rancher, every skilled horse trainer, every talented animal handler throughout history has been involved in, learning to communicate with and lead animals in ways that bring out their best instincts rather than their worst fears. But the way they organized themselves seemed almost supernatural. Did it? Or did it just seem unusual because you'd never seen animals respond to truly effective leadership before? Cornelia. Think about it. You've seen how horses respond to great riders, how dogs respond to skilled trainers, how even wild animals can be approached safely by people who understand their nature. What happened here is part of that same continuum, just more dramatic than you're used to seeing. Sam considered this, realizing that Cornelius was right. He had seen examples of seemingly impossible animal behavior before. Horses that seemed to read their riders' minds, dogs that could predict their owners' needs, cattle that followed certain cowboys like they were hypnotized. The difference was degree, not kind. So what made the difference? Why did my cattle respond to you so dramatically when they've been giving me trouble for months? Because, Cornelius said simply, you've been approaching them as problems to be solved rather than as partners to be led. You've been fighting against their needs instead of working. And most importantly, you've been so frustrated and worried that they've absorbed those emotions and reflected them back to you. This explanation resonated deeply with Sam. He realized that his mounting frustration with the cattle had created a feedback loop. The more trouble they gave him, the more impatient he became, which made them more likely to be troublesome, which made him even more impatient. So, breaking that cycle was really just a matter of changing my energy and approach? Exactly. And now that you've seen what's possible when that cycle is broken, you have a choice. You can maintain these new patterns and continue to see positive results, or you can slip back into old habits and recreate the old problem. As Cornelius spoke, Sam noticed that his perfectly organized cattle were beginning to move around more freely. They maintained their formation. It was as if they had learned a new way of being together and appealing, even as they went about their normal activities. They're staying organized even as they move around, Sam observed with wonder. Because organization feels better than chaos when it's the right kind of organization, Cornelia explained. What you see now isn't rigid control. It's voluntary cooperation based on trust and mutual benefit. A group of riders appeared on the horizon, heading toward the ranch. Sam recognized them as some of his neighbors, the same ones who had been complaining about his wandering cattle for weeks. Oh no, I bet they're coming to give me another earful about my livestock problem. Or, Cornelius suggested, they're coming to see what you've done different. Word travels fast in ranch country, and organized cattle are unusual enough to attract attention. As the riders approached, Sam could expression anger, accused, expected. Instead, they looked curious and maybe even impressed. "Morning, Sam," called out his neighbor, Jake Moore, as the group reined in near the barn. "We were riding the boundary and couldn't help but notice your cattle seem to have gotten themselves remarkably well organized. Haven't seen anything like it in 20 years of ranching. The damnedest thing. They're standing in formation like they're ready for inspection. How'd you manage it?" Sam glanced at Cornelius, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Well, I had some help from a friend who reminded me that leadership is about creating cooperation, not forcing compliance." The neighbors looked at Cornelius with curiosity, taking in his unusual appearance, but seeming to sense that there was more to him than met the eye. "Friend, you any chance he'd be willing to share his methods with the rest of us? We've all had our share of stubborn cats." Sam felt a surge of pride, and for months his relationship with his neighbors had been strained. Now, instead of coming to complain, they were coming to learn. The transformation felt almost as dramatic as what had happened with his herd. "I'm afraid I'll be moving on this," said Paul. "But Sam here has learned the most important principle. I suspect he'd be able to share what he's discovered." The idea of becoming a resource for his neighbors instead of a source of problems filled Sam with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. "I'd be happy to work with anyone who's interested, though I should warn you, I'm still learning myself. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who are students. Mind if we stick around and watch how you work with them this morning?" What followed was one of the most satisfying experiences of Sam. Under Cornelius's subtle guidance, he demonstrated the principles of gentle leadership he had learned, showing his neighbors how to read cattle body language, project calm confidence, and create conditions where cooperation felt natural. The neighbors were amazed not just by the techniques, but by the transformation in Sam himself. The frustrated, desperate man they had known for the past few months had been replaced by someone who radiated quiet confidence and genuine enthusiasm for his work. "I have to say, Sam," Jake, as they watched him successfully guide a group of cattle through a complex movement pattern using only body language and gentle direction, "this is the most relaxed and competent I have seen you in a long. I feel like I'm remembering and discovering who I become." As the morning progressed, word continued to spread, and more neighbors arrived to see the phenomenon of Sam Mackenzie's perfectly organized cattle. What had started as a simple demonstration became an impromptu gathering of the local ranching community. Cornelius watched from the sideline, his painted face glowing with satisfaction as he observed Sam confidently sharing knowledge and building connections with people who had been frustrated with him just days before. "You know," Sam said during a brief break in the demonstration, "I think I understand now what you meant about applying these principles beyond just cattle ranching." "Oh? What have you discovered?" "The same things that made my cattle scattered and uncooperative. Inconsistent leadership, frustrated energy, fighting against their nature instead of working with it. Those were the same things that were damaging my relationships with my neighbors, my hired hands, even with myself." Cornelius nodded approvingly. "And now I can see how creating conditions for cooperation, projecting calm confidence, and treating challenges as opportunities for better communication could transform more than just my relationship with my herd." As if to prove his point, Jake Morrison approached with a proposal. "Sam, a few of us have been talking, and we'd like to invite you to lead a workshop next month for the whole county ranching. What you've learned here could benefit everyone, and it would give you a chance to rebuild your reputation as one of the most knowledgeable cattlemen in the region." The irony wasn't lost. 24 hours ago, his reputation had been in tatters. Now his neighbors were asking him to teach them. The transformation felt miraculous, but he was beginning to understand that it was really just the natural result of changing his approach from fighting problems to creating solutions. "I'd be honored," said, meaning it completely. As the afternoon wore on and neighbors gradually parted, Sam realized that Cornelius as well. The thought filled him with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by remembering what you've learned and sharing it with others who need it, and by trusting yourself to continue growing and discovering new possibilities. Will my cattle stay organized like this as long as you continue to provide the kind of leadership they responded to?" Cornelius. "Remember, what you saw this morning wasn't magic. It was the natural result of effective communication and trust. Maintain those conditions, and you'll continue to see results that seem impossible until they become routine." Sam reached into his pocket and touched the whistle Cornelius had given him. "And if I start to lose my way? Use the tools you've been given, trust what you've learned, and remember that every challenge is an opportunity to practice better leadership. You're more capable than you realize." What happened here today? As Cornelius limped down the road, his colorful costume bright against the dusty landscape, Sam felt a profound sense of completion. Not the kind of completion that comes from finishing something, but the kind that comes from beginning something important. He turned back toward his ranch, where his cattle remained in their gentle formation, and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time in months, he felt ready to meet them with confidence, wisdom, and the kind of leadership that creates cooperation instead of chaos. The tired cowboy who had grudgingly offered shelter to a limping clown was gone, replaced by a man who understood that the most profound transformations often come from the most unexpected teachers, and that sometimes the solution to our biggest problems is learning to speak a language we never knew existed. As the sun set over the Broken Spur Ranch, Sam Mackenzie stood among his perfectly organized cattle and realized that this was just the beginning of a story that would transform not just his ranch, but his entire understanding of what was possible when leadership came from wisdom rather than force, and when cooperation was invited rather than demanded. The whistle in his pocket felt warm against his chest, a reminder that some gifts are simple tools that help us remember who we really are when we're at our best. And somewhere down the dusty road, a limping clown continued his journey, carrying with him the satisfaction of having reminded another person that magic isn't something that happens to us. It's something that happens through us when we learn to lead with love instead of fear. Sam took one last blew softly on the whistle, and smiled as he realized the most extraordinary day of it started with the simple decision to show kindness to a stranger in need. Sometimes the smallest create the largest opportunities, and sometimes a tired cowboy's generosity toward a limping clown can rearrange not just but entire lives.